Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, July 28th, 2020. Time for yet another show, and I guess that's become part of the standard opening these days to say it's time for another show, even though that's really the whole point of my beginning to speak at 9 o'clock anyway. But, all right, so it's built in. Big deal. You know, we can spend a few moments making one another comfortable before we roll things out. Bill does it every morning, and sometimes we even read it aloud, and we can do it right now. Daily Coast Radio is live now. That's how we can do this live reading of the tweet that tells you that we're live now. Today, Kagro X, me, David Waldman, welcomes Joan McCarter. It is a Tuesday, and so we think everything is on track for that. We've got some upcoming schedule changes and some vacations planned and some working days planned, but I think next week is when we'll miss out on Joan once again. But this week I think we're on. She'll be on the show to figure out what the hell is going on, and that's the way it reads here with the ellipses and everything. And so I think that's basically the charge for the day, as is usually the case. It's a confusing day. Plenty to dive into. Plenty will be happening while we're on the show. I think is today, or I can't tell from, I don't have enough articles available to me on Bill Barr's testimony. Is it that he's testifying today and that we got a preview of his prepared statement yesterday, or did he testify yesterday and I missed that and we're reacting to what he actually said? I don't know if that makes any serious difference. I don't think he was intent on showing up and telling anybody the truth or being transparent about things. So I don't think we missed out in any serious way on insight into what he testified. But we'll try and figure out at least the chronology of it. And maybe that's something Joan can bring us up to speed on. So very many things happening today. I guess, I don't know, what would you say is the top Twitter story for the morning? There are several candidates. Let's see. One is the circulating New York Times story, which at least makes the claim, and I'm sure it will be disputed at some point, and I've seen the Trump supporters out there disputing it because it came from either too few or too secretive a range of sources, with the New York Times reporting. And I don't know whether we discussed it yesterday or made the guess yesterday or the other day or at any point about what was really happening here. But the claim from Donald Trump, as most claims turn out to be from Donald Trump, that he was going to throw out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium, but that he is canceling the appearance because of how hard he's working on the coronavirus. I know we mentioned at least this part. Turns out to be a gigantic lie. He was never invited to throw the first pitch at Yankee Stadium, and it appears that he made up the claim, one, because he's a demented idiot and an egomaniac, but I guess the egomaniac part comes in. The story is, once he found out that Fauci was throwing out the first pitch at a game, he couldn't stand that Fauci would be getting more attention than he is getting. There are so many other trappings of office that go along with the presidency that you'd think it would be easy enough to do, to distinguish between the man who purports to be president of the United States, and then by all appearances is thought by those assigned to serve the presidency to be fulfilling that role, and whatever the hell the title is that Dr. Fauci holds. I can't even recall. It's not Health and Human Services Director or Secretary. He's the director of the Institute of Infectious Diseases, or who knows? I can't even remember how many departments of the National Institutes of Health we have and which one he works for. But it's fairly easy to tell the difference between him and the President of the United States, not just in their respect for science or understanding of medicine, but the differences between their two offices. And there are many, many things that, Donald, there are many things that you have and toys that you can play with that Anthony does not have and he cannot play with. And you're a very privileged young man and you don't need to be jealous of him. He got to throw out a baseball at a baseball game, throw out the first pitch. But apparently that drove him up the wall. So, and no one was really talking about it. I mean, did you run into anybody anywhere? Of course the answer is no. But did you run into anybody anywhere? Could you imagine running into anybody anywhere where if you said, hey, Anthony Fauci is throwing out the first pitch at a Nationals game, that the response would be, this undermines the presidency. How can we have it that the president doesn't throw out the first pitch? And he do it at the Nationals game. He's going to have to do it at Yankee Stadium. It's the only more famous, or in his mind anyway. I mean, he would probably rank Yankee Stadium, New York City, as a bigger deal than throwing out the first pitch at a Washington Nationals game. And he's probably right about that. But anyway, no disrespect to the Nationals. I understand they won some sort of championship or something. They're, I guess, my local team now. Whatever. They did a good job. But Yankees, legendary, New York City, that's where Trump is from. So he'll have a thing about it. But can you imagine having somebody say that to you and not hitting them over the head with probably with a baseball bat would be a good idea to use in an instance like that. But just, what are you talking about? This doesn't impact on anybody else in any way. It's nothing. It's a nice honor, but it's throwing a ball at an empty baseball stadium at that. So Trump makes up that he's been invited, but he's too busy to do it anyway. And, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's the sickest aspect of this whole thing, because there's another contender here, which is that the New York Times had to spend time straightening out whether or not he was scheduled to throw out the first pitch. Trump announced, then canceled a Yankees pitch. Both came as a surprise. And there were so many other surprises involved there, like the President of the United States continues to exhibit signs of mental instability and possibly delusional insanity. But whatever, somehow we're going to normalize this. In a story about not normalizing this, we're going to normalize it anyway. I ask you, who has the mental illness in all of this? I don't know. There's a case to be made for us, the readers, being the ones who are sick here. Trump announced, then canceled a Yankees pitch. Both came as a surprise. The president's announcement that he would pitch at Yankee Stadium, well, that's not what it means. But imagine if he had announced that. I'm going to be the starting pitcher for the Yankees that day, as a matter of fact. I mean, why not announce that? That's just as believable. Okay, it's not. But it was scheduled, apparently. He said it was scheduled for August 15th. He's not busy. He's not working on a coronavirus or anything else. But anyway, the announcement startled the team's officials who had not scheduled such an event. And we have normalized this. Just as a reminder, in case you forgot, because it had been so normalized, do you remember that Trump's speech to the graduating class at West Point was similarly a fabrication, a lie that he made up, and he announced that he was going, but he's the commander-in-chief of the United States military, and he's got the capacity to order them to do this. Now, he went on, the lesson he learned from this apparently was, I'm the commander-in-chief of everything, and I can order the New York Yankees to do something too. And he might be able to get the Yankees PR operation to go along with something like that. And for all I know, when presidents end up throwing out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium or any other stadium, it might be the case that the president says, I would like the opportunity to do that, and tells a staffer, can you contact the team to see about that opportunity when it might arise, and could we arrange for such an invitation? It may initiate with the president's office, but this is the way he got to give the speech at West Point. And I guess really the point of bringing that up is very few people, it's not that you don't remember it or very few people know that or anything like that. It's probably very few people's thoughts went to that immediately. But there are, 6-7 billion people in the world. So odds are that several million of you, but that's very few in the grand scheme of things, went to that thought and said, we keep normalizing this. I think in the main, think of the West Point thing. We may remember how ridiculous he was about the ramp. We'll never forget that. He will never let us forget that, which is another sign of his mental illness. But the idea that, I think we've normalized that in our heads. Yeah, hey, presidents give speeches to graduating classes at West Point all the time. And I guess the ramp story superseded the story about how he barged in and forced his way in on that, and they weren't going to even have such a ceremony or something like that. And then he forced everybody to come back and quarantine for 2 weeks, and then stand in formation while he gave them the dumb speech, and then he wrecked the whole thing with the ramp. It's just, we forgot that he did things that way, and now I guess we're supposed to be surprised all over again that he tried to elbow his way into Yankee Stadium. Well, there's a whole other story that goes with it by people who investigated it and know what's going on, so maybe we'll read their thoughts on it. Maybe they know what they're doing. Katie Rogers and Noah Weiland, although really, honestly, just New York Times assignment, just call me. I will do your story for you. And so far, largely for free. Here's their version of it. An hour before Dr. Anthony Fauci threw out the first pitch. He beat him to it. At the season opener between the New York Yankees, that's where he got the idea maybe, and the Washington Nationals, President Trump stood on the briefing room stage at the White House and declared that he too had been invited to throw out his own opening pitch. Randy Levine, is it Levine? I don't know. I don't follow the Yankees. He's a great friend of mine from the Yankees. Mr. Trump, referring to the president of the baseball team, told reporters on Thursday as Dr. Fauci was preparing to take the mound. And he asked me to throw out the first pitch, and I think I'm going to do that on August 15th at Yankee Stadium. There was only one problem. There were several problems. But there was only one problem that they're willing to talk about. Mr. Trump had not actually been invited on that day by the Yankees, according to one person with knowledge of Mr. Trump's schedule. His announcement surprised both Yankees officials and the White House staff. The trolls who denied this story are saying, well, according to one person, really, that's it? Well, one well-placed person. Maybe they're lying. I don't know. But it seems to fit the pattern. Like I said, having remembered that he did this West Point, it becomes a lot easier to believe if you had any trouble believing it at all in the first place. I was invited, and I was invited first, but I'm throwing second for some reason. And it's happening in New York instead of the city where I am now for some other reason, unknown. So there you go. There were several problems. Not just that one, but also the president is insane and an egomaniac and didn't win the election, but is being called president anyway. But Mr. Trump has been so annoyed by Dr. Fauci's turn in the limelight, an official familiar with his reaction said, that he had directed his aides to call Yankees officials and make good on a long-time standing offer from Mr. Levine to throw out an opening pitch. No date was ever finalized. So there's some basis for even without this arrangement ahead of time, there's some basis for the President of the United States to believe that he could do this or even commandeer this. But I guess the real problem begins when you say, hey, Anthony Fauci is throwing out the first pitch at the Nationals tonight. Isn't that great? And the response instead is, this is an outrage. We have to do something about this. Why am I not throwing out the first pitch? What's a more famous place for me to throw out a pitch as opposed to, Or really, honestly, if I'm president of the United States and I'm facing his problem, I wouldn't be facing his problem. But if I was dropped into his shoes, and I'm me, not him. Of course, if I was dropped into his shoes, I'd probably slide right out the front of them because the lift's in there. But anyway, if I'm president, just dropped in, parachuted in at that point, and somebody says to me, hey, Anthony Fauci is throwing out the first pitch at the Nationals game tonight, the opening game with the Yankees, I would say, if I liked the person, I guess I would say, that's interesting and terrific, except there's a coronavirus pandemic and there's uproars all over the country and demonstrations going on and systemic racism and people who can't afford food. What are you telling me that for? I mean, we should be using our time for something else. And if I'm in a bad mood, what are you, an idiot? Read a newspaper, I would say. What do I pay you for? I don't pay you, but okay. You get the idea. After the president's announcement, the White House aides scrambled to let the team know that he was actually booked on August 15th, although they have not said what he plans to do. Oh, I see. That he was actually booked on August 15th, but they don't know what, and how do you book him? He wasn't booked for the stadium. He was booked for something else, like, I don't know, golfing and pooping on a golden toilet, I guess. But I guess it's a good assumption. Geez, is the president busy on August 15th? Well, of course, he's the president, and we're in trouble 6 different ways. So, yeah, he's busy. We won't be out of that trouble by August 15th. What's he doing in particular? I don't know. But that is interesting because I guess the aides that were asked, well, how is he free on the 15th? Because the game is at, some certain time. We don't know. I mean, he's busy, but we don't know what he's doing. That's your job, but that we don't know. But we do know that Anthony Fauci is throwing out a pitch, and we give him the news and upset him with it. Over the weekend, though, Mr. Trump officially canceled. And then, of course, remember the statement, because of my strong focus, my very strongly focus on the China strongly virus, including beautiful scheduled meetings on capital V vaccines, our economy, and much else, I won't be able to be in New York to throw out the opening pitch for the Yankees on August 15th. Mr. Trump wrote on Twitter on Sunday using a racist name for the coronavirus. They helpfully point out, that's good. We will make it later in the season. That's what he says. By the way, I'm reminded by Mighty OCD here that don't forget about, with the West Point story, the 20-something cadets, not their age, although that's true too, but the 20 in number cadets that tested positive for COVID after coming back for the speech, although we don't know whether they caught it. I guess they caught it at home and then brought it with them, but yes. I was going to say I didn't forget about them because I know about them, but I didn't say anything about them, so I can't prove it. So maybe I did forget them. We're all about proof on the show, except when we're not. And so, continues the tense relationship, the reporters say, between Mr. Trump, a president who hates sharing media attention, and Dr. Fauci, a renowned infectious disease expert who doesn't mind the spotlight. He appeared this month in a spread in InStyle magazine, for instance, lounging, and they note here, and parenthetically, fully clothed, as I had assumed to this point, lounging poolside. Though, I guess, yeah, your mind could go there because he's poolside, but he's just looking to somebody, have a prankster throw him in the pool, and maybe it didn't develop. To be sure, there are bigger problems on either man's plate, yes, although there's very rarely anything left on Trump's plate. Mr. Trump is struggling to explain his administration's missteps on everything in the world, including a pandemic that has killed more than 148,000 Americans. We're past 150,000 now, of course. Dr. Fauci is trying to assert himself as a public health-minded voice of an administration that seems to have little interest in science and sometimes even less interest in him. Both men are baseball fans. Trump grew up playing the sport, allegedly. I saw the pictures of him having a catch with Mariano Rivera, and it didn't look like it. But I mean, it was an unfortunate shot, I'm sure. Dr. Fauci, with his Nationals-themed coronavirus mask, has nearly reached alternate mascot status. Oh, they should make one of those big head mascots when they race the presidents to throw a Fauci in there. That would drive Trump up the wall. Oh, this is a good idea. We really should do that. Can you imagine the four? Who do they have? They got Jefferson, Lincoln, Washington. Is it Teddy Roosevelt that they use in the race when they have mascots and they race running around the bases? Suppose they add a fifth mascot and it's not Trump. That would kill him. And if it was Fauci, it wasn't even a president. That would really be something. They should do it. Reason? I'm no better than he is when it comes to pettiness. Okay. So he's got alternate mascot status. Both are ostensibly too busy to be bogged down with baseball rivalries. But this is not the first time Mr. Trump has made such a request to fend off a potential upstaging. So here's the other group of people among the billions who remembered this. In April, the day before Vice President Mike Pence, again, the day before he was to speak at the Air Force commencement ceremony in Colorado, Trump suddenly announced that he would be speaking at West Point. That was news to officials at West Point. So once again, day before, the news reaches him. He's a slow learner on the news curve. He reads it when we read it. No additional briefings, no additional intelligence for this president beyond the average. And then says, Air Force, huh? Well, I know what's one academy that's more prestigious than the Air Force Academy. I'll go with the U.S. Military Academy and go there. Last week, Dr. Fauci was determined to come to the Nationals mound prepared. Did he? Because I saw that pitch. Growing up in Brooklyn, he played shortstop on a local Catholic youth team. Days before the pitch on Thursday, he went to Horace Mann, an elementary school in Northwest Washington, to rehearse on the lawn. I pitched and pitched, he said in an interview on Monday. I threw my arm out. Maybe that's why it happened. I hadn't thrown a baseball literally in decades. After I practiced, my arm was hanging around my feet. But he said he made a fatal error. Without a baseball field at the school to practice on, he had to measure 60 feet, the distance from a major league mound to home plate, himself, and he accidentally came up about 20 feet short. Oh, that's bad. Numbers should be a strength for him. Don't you think? Right, yeah. Well, what can you do? So he underestimated by 1/3. Well, that's what we're doing with the pandemic, so maybe it's all consistent. Once Dr. Fauci arrived on the mound at Nationals Park, he realized the vast expanse, and the visit went south. He cocked his arm back only slightly, crooked, and flung the ball diagonally into the grass. Yeah, this is kind of how it happened. Far from Sean Doolittle, the Nationals player assigned to catch the pitch. Would that be the catcher, or is he not the catcher? They don't bother sending the catcher because they don't need all the equipment to catch I don't know. Anyway, he looked to me like he was 500 feet away. That made me throw it much harder than I had been practicing, Fauci said. I completely miscalculated the distance from the mound. I'm not there for his trigonometry. Dr. Fauci said his invitation from the Nationals came weeks ago as a thank you from Ted Lerner's family, which owns the team, after he advised them and club officials on the correct protocols for coronavirus testing and staying safe while playing. Fauci, should we go on with this? It's kind of fun. Fauci broadcast appearances are generally controlled by the White House, but the appearance at Nationals Park did not have to go through the usual clearance process at the NIH, which takes in his other news media and event requests. That's how it happened. Asked whether he had advice if Mr. Trump were able to confirm a date with the Yankees, Fauci said the president should be sure to throw high and with a big loft. The worst thing he can do is bounce it like I did, he said. Off the baseball field, Fauci's star turn has not gone over well in the White House. In past weeks, he has questioned senior administration officials about the effort to curb his television appearances and criticized other officials who have made disparaging remarks about him. I think they realize now that that was not a prudent thing to do because it's only reflecting negatively on them, Fauci said this month of White House aides, including Peter Navarro, Trump's trade advisor, who wrote an op-ed questioning Fauci's credibility, which is not something you can do from the trade advisor position, really, and have people understand it to be meaningful. But as the prominence of the coronavirus task force faded in recent weeks, that was intentional, Dr. Fauci was left out of a new group of White House officials, also intentional, that meets on the virus, led by Jared Kushner, that's who did it, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, and Dr. Deborah Birx, the coronavirus response coordinator. So that's the story on the least important story that we were still interested in, but it tells you a little something about where he's coming from. Fauci also in the news, coming in for criticism from some crazy Trump-supporting person who purports to be a doctor, and I don't really know what her credentials are, so I can't speak to it. She may, in fact, be a medical doctor and crazy. There are several. But I guess she's been posting videos on YouTube and Facebook, and they are typical wacko fare. But I guess it all came to Trump's notice. I don't know whether she was doing it anyway or she decided to shift to hydroxychloroquine as her focus so that she would get noticed by the president. But it worked, and her video promoting hydroxychloroquine, or more specifically, appearing with other doctors or people who were willing to wear white doctor lab coats to get into a press conference, I think in Washington, D.C. somewhere, and come to the microphone and say not only that hydroxychloroquine works fantastically, but that there is a giant conspiracy led by Dr. Fauci to suppress the truth about the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine and why is it happening and shouldn't we be doing something about it. That got to Trump along with 13 point something million other people. Trump retweeted it approvingly. We're back in the hydroxychloroquine game. Apparently, Rudy Giuliani's talking about it. He's tweeting about it. This doctor is tweeting about it. By the way, other people dove into her record. So in case you're thinking of giving it a chance, like a lot of the trolls on Twitter would have you do, well, how do you know? Are you a medical doctor? Maybe they're wrong. Maybe the studies are wrong. Shouldn't we keep an open mind? Remember to keep an open mind to the rest of her platform, which apparently includes that, I don't know which comes first in this chicken or egg relationship, but having sex with demons can make you sick. That's, probably true. Would be true, I think. Probably most of the people who would agree to have sex with demons, I wouldn't be surprised if their health was threatened in some way, and I just don't know how they get around to doing that. But just to let you know where she's coming from and where Trump is getting his medical advice, that's out there too. So, okay, that was a good occupation of our first segment of the show, I think. It's kind of dominating the news. Shouldn't be. We should be focusing on getting out from underneath the pandemic. But there are so many other stories that indicate, as usual, that once again, the conclusion we've reached here on the show is the correct one. We cannot exit from this pandemic while Donald Trump's so-called authority is recognized and given weight in this country. There can't be, at the end of this, both a Donald Trump presidency and a continuing republic here in the United States, not to mention the chances of our surviving this thing. And this extends to the entirety of the world. That's just the position America at least used to occupy before he was president. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. So if you were wondering, it's Dr. Stella Emanuel is her name. She tweets as Stella_Emanuel, IMMANUEL. I don't recommend that you follow her, but if you wanted to take a look and have a laugh or cry, go ahead and do so. The Daily Beast is the one that came up with the story about the demon sex. Leave it to the Daily Beast. And I guess, hey, maybe that's what the name of the publication is all about, after all. Who knows? They say, under Will Sommer's headline here, Trump's new favorite COVID doctor, maybe, believes in alien DNA, which I'm sure exists. I'll roll the dice and say it exists. Anyway, demon sperm, that one not so sure about, and hydroxychloroquine definitely does exist. I have reason to believe it exists. The others of them, maybe not. The president is pushing the coronavirus theories of a Houston doctor who also says sexual visitations by demons and alien DNA are at the root of Americans' common health concerns. That takes things a step beyond, I think. Are there aliens? Maybe. Are there demons? Maybe. Would having sex with those demons, I don't know whether you're supposed to, I don't know how the alien DNA gets into it other than sex, but, there are other methods. But since she opened the door to sex, I figure maybe that's it too. Are they at the root of Americans' common health concerns? Oh, there I differ. what can I tell you? Anyway, these are, I guess, the searches through her videos for Fire Power Ministries. So she's a doctor and a preacher. That happens. Who believes in, demons and aliens and hydroxychloroquine. Pick your poison. Well, the only one that's really a poison is hydroxychloroquine. But I guess the claim here is that the other things are poison too. I'm intrigued, but I can't imagine it being a good use of time to read the article. So I'll simply say it's out there. I'll include it in the roundup. You read it, you crazy idiot. Don't make me do it. On my own time, I would definitely do this, but I don't think it's a wise use of our time right now. Okay, so let's go back. There's other petty coronavirus news includes, I don't think we made mention of Arkansas State Senator, I mentioned this at home. People will recognize the name Jason Rapert, I don't know, Rapert, Raper with the T on the end. And I think that's probably, might even be accurate. I don't know the guy, but he's sick with COVID. I remember seeing his name the other day, billed as a virulently anti-gay state senator. And apparently, I see he's using his time well. Who's Monica Potts? Monica Potts, a verified type of person and an author at that on Twitter, who says Arkansas State Senator Jason Rapert, go with that pronunciation, is sick with COVID, but not too sick to encourage violence, especially against women and people of color, including a couple of his tweets there. His tweets are not the main part of the story. I just thought I would throw that in to a collection of other stories, including this one that I noticed being tweeted around by The Hill yesterday. At least 10 in the Tennessee legislature test positive for coronavirus, and I believe we've seen a couple of other stops around the country at various state houses where there were outbreaks. Mississippi, I think, was mentioned, maybe even in this article. 10 Tennessee lawmakers and legislative staffers have tested positive for the coronavirus as of Monday afternoon, according to Connie Ridley, Director of Legislative Administration there in Tennessee. While Ridley has not offered specifics on who tested positive and the breakdowns of lawmakers versus legislative staffers, State Representative Kent Calfee, a Republican, confirmed that he and his wife both tested positive earlier in July, according to the Tennessean. The first two cases were confirmed earlier this month, when Ridley said several cases and any possible exposures to them are being handled as the CDC recommends, citing federal privacy laws and declining to provide any further details. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee's administration would not provide positive case totals to the publication. Not surprising there. But it does mention down here lower in the article, in the legislature, the numbers are lower than those in Mississippi, where as of July 15th, 30 lawmakers and 11 employees have tested positive for the virus. So that may or may not be making believers out of Republicans in some of these states. I don't know the partisan breakdown, but I'll bet it follows mask wearing, and since that follows partisan lines, chances are a good number of them are Republicans. In other coronavirus news, and really, it's all coronavirus news at this point, let me share this news that comes from our Twitter friend, That Guy 3002. I don't know whether this is 30 or 2 or 3002, but that's what we got. That Guy who tweets all the time and sends us good material all the time, very frequently sends, more generally stuff about Simpsons scripts. And I think we've mentioned him before, and I get the sense, and I never really had it entirely clarified for me, maybe he'll tell me, that he worked on, did he help participate in writing those Simpsons scripts? It certainly seems like it, unless he's just got lots of insider knowledge about them. Anyway, nothing to do with the Simpsons. He sends us this news about our favorite resigned doctor from out of Ohio, Dr. Action, who I really wish that was still her name, but we know now her name is Dr. Amy Acton. She was formerly the Ohio health director in charge of COVID response back when Ohio was doing well with things. And as you may recall, she resigned on June 11th after protests began outside of her house. Remember the anti-mask people protesting her personally and outside of her house and making threatening remarks about her and her family. So she bowed out. And here, that guy sends us a chart of how's Ohio been doing since the beginning of this pandemic in terms of new cases daily, et cetera, and marking July 11th on the chart for us. And wouldn't you know it, there's a peak here, a very early, late April, early May peak of daily cases in the neighborhood of the mid 900s or so at that point. And then a sharp drop just before the end of April and into May, a little recovery in the direction opposite, going back up over 500 cases a day through early May, and then finally a downward trend as June began. So on June 11th, when she resigned, there were 429 new cases reported. That was at or near the low point in the trough following the initial spikes. They were on a clear downward trend. Post June 11th, not only does it return up, it spikes and spikes and spikes and goes up to where we're now sitting at around, the last date reported July 25th, looked to be in the neighborhood of, let's say about 1,370 to 1,400 cases a day. So up another 1,000 cases a day since Dr. Action left the scene. Just a good call in pointing that out from that guy. We thank you for that. Another small-ish, small bore coronavirus story, but definitely of some interest. I happened to see this one on the front page at Daily Kos yesterday from, I don't know everybody at the staff anymore, Aisha, it doesn't look like it's Aisha necessarily, but Aisha Kamar, with a Q in front. She's not from QAnon or anything like that, but maybe people will come up with that connection themselves later, and I'm sure she'll love it. Anyway, more than 24 lifeguards working the Jersey Shore beaches have tested positive for COVID-19. So, again, nothing necessarily magical about spending your time on the beach. It depends, one, how you conduct yourself on the beach and what you do with yourself when you're not on the beach. One of the things that lifeguards do besides guard lives on beaches is they leave those beaches and go elsewhere. And that appears to be how they contracted the virus, or at least that's, supposed to be our initial guess based on the rest of the story. Yeah, they were at a lifeguard party and passed the coronavirus around to each other that way. Now, one other way you might worry about picking up the virus on the beach is the story is illustrated with a photo of beach goers walking around in the shallows of the water, and floating in the shallow water at the edge of the shore here is an abandoned face mask. You've probably noticed out where trash escapes, other places in the countryside, abandoned masks, gloves, etc. I'm sure that's becoming a widespread trash problem in cities where those are in use, and I guess elsewhere when they wash up from dumping our garbage offshore. Anyway, so no huge emergency there, but just, be aware that because of activities probably off the beach, you go to the beach because it's outdoors and safe and you can socially distance and you can do all those things. But people with coronavirus are going to be on that beach somewhere, so you're not. Don't let your guard down. Don't lose sight of what you're doing. And hey, how would you like this? It's low odds on this one, but suppose you decide to take advantage of this. You go to the beach, you're relaxing. Something goes wrong while you're in the water. You require saving. The lifeguards do what they're supposed to do. They save you. You survive because of what they're able to do for you, because there are lifeguards on the beach. This is not Mogadishu. We are not, libertarians here. We protect people going to the beach. But suppose they save you from drowning, but give you coronavirus in passing while they're busy saving you. It's better than drowning, clearly. But it would be a bit of a bummer really, honestly, if you almost drown and you're saved by a healthy lifeguard. That's a bit of a bummer, too. So, I don't know. Just throwing that out there. being at the beach doesn't automatically make you safe. Speaking of where I saw this story, which was on the front page of Daily Kos, not the Daily Kos. We don't say it that way. Apparently, the new rage there is to rage about the new design of the front page. Although they do give you the option, they did a major overhaul of the front page. As I understand it, the motivation there is to bring things out of like the ancient blog format, which doesn't really, happen anymore, and doesn't necessarily serve our purposes in disseminating news and analysis, and giving it a more of a news site, news feed look to it. Although, it is essentially what it was before in terms of how content gets created. It's just how content is presented. But I guess the hot thing to do now is to post diaries about how you hate the new format and you can't find your way around in it. And I understand and sympathize. They did give you a button, because they knew that this would be a problem, that you can use to revert to the old format while you find your way around. I've had to use it just to sort of quickly find my way around when I needed to move in and out of the place without stopping to read. I like the new format. It looks nice to me. But yeah, it's a different kind of organization, and that upsets people. I just wanted to point out, as I did in a comment in one of those blogs, there has diaries rather. There has never been in the history of Daily Kos, certainly, and maybe of the entire world, a new design that people liked instantly and said, this is great. That was universally praised and adopted as the new format going forward. Everybody always hates the new one because it's new. Not that they're resistant to change necessarily, but it's hard to find your way around in things that you had habitually. You developed muscle memory about how to find your way around at Daily Kos. And this is probably, the fifth or sixth time we've been through it. And every time there are people who threaten to leave the blog, and, I guess some of them do. Most of them end up not doing it. It's not that that's weird. I go through it. Bothers me each time too, but I've gotten used to it now. Like I said, this being the fifth or sixth time it's happened. But I will also point out, as we sometimes do when we talk about process and procedure and rules in Congress here on the show, don't forget that the format that you really liked, that you're clinging to, and no judgment involved in clinging. I will cling to that too. You like it. It's fun. It's familiar, and it's there for a reason. But that format that you like so much, that you refuse to abandon and works so well for you, was once the new format that everybody hated and swore that they were going to quit using Daily Kos over. But then eventually it just kind of replaced it, and now people are insistent that they will resign over the change to a new one, which will likewise eventually become the one that gets changed later, and everybody wants the old one back. And remember when no one wanted it? Just sort of pointing it out there. Have fun being part of the process of change if you can, and hang around. Don't leave. Don't resign from the site. There's no resignation that you can do as a user, I suppose, but you could make a big stink of things. Don't leave. Power through it so that you can be part of the old guard later that says, they used to say that about this format, but now you love that, and you'll be able to make the same point and feel real cool like I do. It feels great. It doesn't feel any different, but I want to give people hope. All right, let's see. Another story that I think I'll mention, but maybe we don't really need to dive that far into because I think you all intuitively knew it, but here's the proof that you were smart. I happen to have grabbed it this time from Talking Points memo. I am sure it's been discussed already at Daily Kos. D.C. National Guard whistleblower details tear gas op for Trump photo shoot. And the big news here is it's confirmed they definitely did, in fact, use tear gas and did so intentionally, and they may or may not have known that there was a photo op involved, but it was done so that Trump could do this thing, whatever it was that he demanded to be able to do to the commanders. Was done for exactly the reason you thought and exactly the way you thought, despite all the denials about the use of tear gas, which are pretty easy to disprove, given that everyone was choking and tearing out there. But there you have it. So we've got a whistleblower on record saying, yeah, I was there. I was one of the National Guardsmen, and I saw that weaponry deployed. The end. Okay. Other coronavirus news, since we're still on the subject, another smallish story, but one worth sharing. Down in Florida, an actual judge has ruled in an actual case, we do not have a constitutional right to infect others, and upholds Palm Beach County's mask orders. You're seeing them challenged in court all over the country, at least in Palm Beach, Florida. At least on the trial level, the judge there says, yeah, it's absolutely a valid power of the local government, and those mask orders are valid. I suppose there'll be an appeal. We'll see what kind of pockets the plaintiffs have. There's a lot of deep pockets down there in Palm Beach County, so they could certainly afford to go further. But there you have it. Palm Beach County did nothing illegal by making people wear coronavirus, it says marks, but I'm sure they meant masks, in public places, a judge said Monday, upholding measures that have sparked a furious debate about public safety and personal freedom. And then the line there, we do not have a constitutional right to infect others. Circuit Court Judge John Kastranakis, I'm going to guess at that pronunciation, said in his order, the first in South Florida. That implies like there's been more in North Florida, but I don't know if that's the case. Kastranakis said the county was within its rights to require a mask to protect the public during a deadly pandemic, and people who challenged the mandate failed to show that their constitutional rights were violated. Good, sensible. That's what you need to know. That's where it happened. Whether or not there was anything in any other part of Florida in terms of ruling, not entirely clear. I think that's their coverage area, South Florida. So that's good news. We'll see whether it stands and for which it stands. One nation under God. As a matter of fact, as soon as I said stands, my mind went to that. Let's see. Other great information and terrible information to share. Let's see. One, more quick hit coronavirus news. CNN reporting 2 students tested positive for coronavirus after taking the ACT. It's an American college testing, the SAT alternative, at an Oklahoma high school. Let's see what the particulars are here. 2 tested positive for COVID-19, and as many as 200 others may have been exposed after taking the ACT college admissions test at an Oklahoma high school. That's disappointing news. It doesn't exactly say, well, we'll look into see if there's any details about how they contracted it and when, but I'm sure that was probably an issue for months. They were thinking about how can we get kids together to take these tests. We can't, that's not something we can do with distance learning. You got to have proctored tests for these things. But you can build in social distancing, certainly, into those testing. They usually do anyway, just as a hedge against cheating. Anyway, the 2 students tested positive on Sunday, just one day after taking the ACT at Edmond North High School on July 18th, according to an ACT spokesperson. So it's likely they came in there with it, as opposed to one day after the test showing positive. But I'm curious about the scheduling of the test for them, or the coronavirus test, not the ACT test. Because normally, if you thought, oh, I really feel terrible today, and I probably caught the coronavirus at the testing center because there were so many people there, I'll go get a test. You probably caught it a couple days before then. And guess what? It's interesting because you're probably sitting at home saying, damn it, I knew I shouldn't have gone. Some jackass gave me the coronavirus at the ACT. But if you took your coronavirus test the day after the ACT and got your positive result, chances are you were the a-hole who went to ACT testing who was sick and endangered everybody else. Which, if you're testing to get into college, you should have been able to figure out for yourself. But kids are young. Maybe they don't know. Anyway, upon learning of the positive tests, the school immediately contacted local public health officials, notified ACT, and we have informed all the students and test monitors in attendance that day. Good move. Thanks to Tara D'Souza, the spokesperson, who gave us that news. As part of the ACT's test center social distancing guidelines, Students and monitors were asked to complete a series of COVID-19 symptom and travel screening questions, instructed to practice social distancing guidelines while on campus, and it was recommended that masks be worn by all. Students, parents, and test administrators who were in the same testing center as the two students received emails from ACT officials alerting them that they were likely within the area of one or both of these students for up to 15 minutes. I don't know how likely it is necessarily, but it's a fair warning. I guess that really basically means, according to seat assignments, I guess they're, and they know the seat assignments, but did all the people get that, or just the people who were in their immediate proximity? According to seat assignments, it's likely that you or a child were on the same floor or room as one or both of these students for up to 4 hours, which is how long they would be there, yeah. Officials were under fire the same weekend after nearly 1,400 students showed up to their testing locations only to find that the test was canceled without warning. That kind of sucks. But for one parent, the cancellation would have been a blessing in disguise. Really? Greta Rasmussen DeCoster's son, high schooler Frederick DeCoster, was one of many students taking the ACT on Saturday in Wood County, Wisconsin. Okay. While no coronavirus cases have been reported from his testing center, Frederick DeCoster is now 1 week into a 14-day quarantine after fearing he may have been exposed to the virus by a student who he said appeared ill. He's worried that if he was exposed, he could pass it on to family members who might be more at risk. So all sorts of dangers with these standardized tests that you have to take in large groups. And apparently people are out to see if they can get colleges to waive SAT and ACT requirements for applications so that they can minimize the number of exposures, I guess, that are out there, or that we have to risk in order to do standardized testing. And a lot of colleges have been considering not requiring them or discounting them in some way anyway for many years for various other reasons. This may be a good excuse for them to go ahead and make that policy change, like the Washington football team, as a matter of fact. Let's see. We'll stick with the theme through the first hour, all coronavirus all the time, because really what else is there? So many angles to approach it from. Here's news from Kentucky, where, as I understand it, yesterday the governor ordered bars closed again, which was probably, they should never have been opened in the first place. Good idea. The Courier-Journal reporting this. Norton Healthcare, local healthcare system, they say, federal government steering COVID-19 test supplies away from Louisville. That according to the article by Grace Schneider, written for the Louisville Courier-Journal, illustrated with some video of Deborah Birx's visit to Kentucky. Anyway, here's the story. Frustrated executives at Louisville's largest hospital system are accusing the federal government of steering COVID-19 test supplies to other states. Democratic governor, remember. Cutting its ability to provide community testing in Kentucky and in-house testing for its patients. In a letter dated Friday to U.S. Representative John Yarmouth, Norton Healthcare Chief Medical Officer Dr. Steve Hester said the health system is reaching the apex of our ability to perform adequate testing for COVID-19 in our clinical laboratories due to reallocation of testing supplies by the federal government. Jared Kushner, the pirate. One vendor, Hologic, I'm guessing how they pronounce that, informed Norton that it's working with the White House to try to allocate resources, but that the company wasn't able to send testing reagents, chemicals that are used to process the virus tests, to Norton last week and this week. Hester asked Yarmouth, a Democratic congressman from the state, to help address the reallocation process amid rising infection rates and concerns of a second wave coming at some point. Yarmouth said Monday he's aware of the problems and sees the situation as extremely serious if we're going to do the testing we need to do. He blamed Trump's administration and the heads of key agencies for botching the response to the pandemic. Problems for hospital systems getting adequate supplies of personal protective equipment were our focus early in the outbreak, but reagents have been an off-and-on issue too. This is another iteration of the problems that have been going on for 3 or 4 months, which is a long time. The federal government is now directing reagents They're not really doing anything to guarantee that there's an adequate national supply. And when we're experiencing an upturn in cases, it's very problematic. That's true. There's more. There's mention of Mitch McConnell. He's likely doing nothing, or worse, doing things that are actively terrible. He too, and maybe this is something we'll perhaps discuss with Joan later on. Of course, they're trying to move more coronavirus relief legislation. Of course, the Republicans in the Senate having their way with it. Bernie Sanders, I think, tweeting earlier today, pointing out, here are some of the essentials that Republicans have included in their coronavirus relief bill. Billions of dollars for Apache helicopters and surveillance planes and various other military hardware and toys. Not even on top of a great plan for giving people relief. The unemployment benefits extensions that they're discussing cut the additional benefits. I don't know where they're settling now, but early reports were that they were cutting back the $600 extra that they were including in that down to $200, and of course still complaining that if you give people money, they'll decide to stop working forever. And you can't have that. Meanwhile, I guess I also did read this morning, you can't give a couple $100 to people who are trying to eat during a pandemic. That would be a huge waste of money. Whereas everything's normal. Don't look at anything over here when we find out that a Florida guy, of course, some guy applied for something like, he asked for like $13.5 million in PPP loans. You remember the Paycheck Protection Program loans, claiming he had a company with a huge payroll and he needed $13-something million, or several companies that needed $13 million. He was only approved for a fraction of that amount, $3.9 million, a mere $3.9 million sent his way, after which he promptly went out and bought himself a Lamborghini. So we've got to make great deals, and this is one of them, I guess. They caught him, and he's in trouble, and that's a good thing. But in the meantime, we can't pay people any money because they might decide that working is a bad idea, and they never want to go back, and the whole economy will be ruined. But a Lamborghini here and there, nothing we can do about that. We'll be right back. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I'm searching around for that Senator Sanders tweet so that I can share it with you, but it's not coming up all that easily. So note to self for the Sanders tweet. Just, I don't know why you would have any difficulty believing that Senator Sanders would tweet such a thing, but it was really more for the list that he provided that I couldn't recall than anything else. All right. So still suppressing the distribution of necessary supplies, probably based on politics more than anything else at the national level. And, things kind of suck. Let's see. There's a couple other things we could take a look at. Oh, yes. We mentioned yesterday with Greg, the wacko ambassador to Iceland, just in passing, that he was apparently had a real serious paranoia problem. CBS News were the folks reporting what I saw on this one. Controversial U.S. ambassador to Iceland wanted firearm and security for his Reykjavik post, which, to anybody who's familiar with what it's like in Reykjavik and in Iceland in general, seems excessive. But yeah, essentially, he lobbied the State Department to lean on the Icelandic government to waive its normal laws and allow the U.S. ambassador to carry a gun in Iceland. I don't know whether he thought he was under any specific threat or just, I'm an ambassador now, and ambassadors are constantly under threat, which they're really not. But, there are security issues in some places around the world, and he just figured Iceland is a place in the world. But he's a big donor. That's how he got the job. He's a dermatologist, apparently. Okay. But presumably he picked Iceland. It may have been his third choice. I don't know. Maybe he wanted to be somewhere else. But he's presumably would have a favorable opinion of Iceland, largely probably based on the relative peace and safety. He probably visited there and enjoyed it. Or who knows? Maybe he wanted England, France, and who knows? Let's say Denmark, because it's fun. or Russia, because he's pro-Russian. I don't know. But they were taken, and he said, they gave him a list, and they said, here's what's left. And he said, I don't know, Iceland. But he wanted a gun, he wanted bodyguards. He apparently wears, or as it says here, entertained the idea of wearing a stab-proof vest, which I presume would be, I might say double as a bulletproof vest, but it's stab-proof too, or maybe he wanted a stab-proof one under the bulletproof one. I don't know. He's that kind of wacko. And he wanted door-to-door armored car service as well. Like he thought, he was going to be kidnapped by drug cartels or something right there in Reykjavik. And like I think I may have mentioned yesterday, Reykjavik, not an easy city like most European cities to drive giant armored cars around in. He was talked out of it, and what's amazing is that Pompeo is the one who had to call him and talk him out of it. But he had to do it gently. He couldn't say, you're a goddamn idiot. What's wrong with you? Because he's a big campaign donor, so you don't want to offend the big campaign donor. But I guess, as we commented here at home about it, thank God Pompeo had his head screwed on right, at least with this, and was willing to call the guy up and say, come on, you're being unreasonable. But that wasn't all he was being unreasonable about, by the way. At the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak, admittedly, Iceland got an early and splashy dose. I guess people who are vacationing at the ski resorts in and around Europe may be making their way back to the United States with stopovers in Iceland, or Icelandic people who went skiing elsewhere came back. They had a big spike. Early on, they were kind of a hot spot. They crushed it because, it's an island country, easy to do. Small population, used to, compliance with things like this, I guess. And they were able to really tamp down on their outbreak. But I guess he was worried about that, and he ran home. He's from California. He ran home. Now, of course, California has far more coronavirus than Iceland ever did. But it probably wasn't the case necessarily when he ran back there. And but then they had difficulty getting him to go back. Once they crushed the coronavirus outbreak in Iceland, he told the State Department, I want to continue working remotely. Now, we're all learning to work remotely, and sometimes even in jobs that we never thought were well suited to that sort of thing. But being ambassador to another country, I mean, we can conduct foreign policy remotely. We don't need an ambassador necessarily to be there. But to the extent that we need one, you really kind of have to be in that country. That's sort of the whole thing, the whole point. And we build all sorts of crazy rules around things for all countries so that they'll be comfortable doing that. For instance, your embassy there is sovereign territory for you. It doesn't count as being within the jurisdiction of Icelandic police. They can't kick your doors down, without creating an international incident. And all sorts of immunities for diplomats, etc., just to get you over the worries you might have about being under someone else's control and under someone else's sovereignty. But it's all designed to make sure that you go there and be a physical presence to represent your country. So much the better that he didn't go, because he was a wacko, and it was better that he wasn't there, probably. I guess another angle on the story, they could not settle on a deputy chief of mission for him. That's usually a high-ranking State Department career official who serves as second in command and is basically there to make sure that weirdos and big donors who don't know anything about diplomacy but who nonetheless are named as ambassadors have someone to look after them and make sure they don't screw everything up terribly or do something awful. But he kept saying that the deputy chief of mission that they were assigning him was incompatible with him. He was getting into petty little fights with him. One of them he wanted fired because that person had come in during the middle of the Icelandic winter, apparently, in snow boots, and then left those snow boots under his own desk at the embassy office building or the consulate or whatever. And that somehow enraged the dermatologist. Maybe it's bad for your skin if you do that. I don't know. And anyway, they keep rotating people just to try to find somebody. I guess they brought in another one, and it says here, Gunter didn't like the look of him at their introductory meeting. So you're fired too. And now they have a rotating crew of them. I guess he's been through 7 deputy chiefs of mission there. But they're not the problem. Oh, I'm sorry. Here in the State Department, they must all be wrong. He's the right guy for the job. Well, there you go. Anyway, apparently he stayed out of Iceland for months. They finally coaxed him back. And, yeah, we're not looking too good to the Icelandic folks over there. I just thought I'd give you the lowdown on some of the dumber aspects of that story. Not just gloss it over. I want to give you all the full 100% dumb. All right. Let's see. Other stories that we might want to touch on. I did see this rather lengthy Twitter thread from Jared Yates Sexton, whose name we call from time to time on the show, making some observations on the now already abandoned new tone from Donald Trump. I can't remember what it was that triggered the new tone. I think he read a speech off of paper, and that was it. But, of course, now retweeting hydroxychloroquine claims from, weirdo doctors, attacking Anthony Fauci, and griping yesterday, I think, that I guess he just noticed the trending topics column on Twitter, and he decided that a lot of them were trending topics about him and that they were unfavorable discussion of him, and that was obviously rigged, and I believe he also threw out illegal somehow in there. So yeah, it's illegal for him to be unpopular on Twitter, according to the very smart brain genius who has no problems. And so the new tone is over with. So maybe this is old news already to hear Jared Yates Sexton talking about the new tone, but it seemed interesting to me, and it's a shift from strictly coronavirus-focused discussion. He begins just by saying, all right, today we need to talk about Trump's new tone, but also his refusal to deal with the pandemic, so we're back to that, and how his history with a strange philosophy called positive thinking led to unbelievable suffering. Yes, he does have that philosophy, and it's not just an offhand, I like positive thinking. There's a theory and a strange philosophy behind it. Here's what he learned about it, I guess, while writing his book, because he's an author. American Rule is the name of his book, and he links to it at Penguin, Random House, whatever. You can buy it. It's got a picture of an upside-down American flag on the cover. For those who haven't seen it, Jared begins again, the Washington Post featured a story that Trump only took the coronavirus seriously once he heard his voters were dying. We need to talk about his bizarre worldview and how it has exacerbated the pandemic. You've probably seen this story. We didn't talk about it, but I guess they got his attention by saying, well, now it's in red states. Our people are dying, even though that might not even be the case. It might be that people of color and minorities are the ones dying in the red states. And once they find that out, then we're finished. Then they'll just let the pandemic rage unabated. But I assume some of, quote unquote, their people are dying as well. And that was supposed to get his attention, but he probably rolled over and yawned. Jared continues, let's get something very clear. Trump is an authoritarian, and it's his nature to make crises worse and then scapegoat others for his failures. This warped mindset in Trump's case can be traced back to his following the philosophy of a man named Vincent Norman Peale, P-E-A-L-E. And so I guess there's a whole developed philosophy behind positive thinking, as opposed to, hey, you should think positively about things because it'll make you happy and then you'll feel better about things or be more successful or whatever. I guess, does this go back to the power of positive thinking? Is that like not just a throwaway phrase? Maybe it's a book by this guy. I'm curious about this. And now I want to read the whole thing next to the threads we read yesterday about his other habit, the deny and attack habit that he displayed during his defense of Trump University. There was a lot more to that article, too, and how he uses it to this date. But still, continuing with Jared here, though Trump is not religious, even though he'll shoot you if you get in between him and a church that he wants to take a picture at, he spent much of his life learning from a prosperity gospel guru named Norman Vincent Peale, a member of what I've come to call the cult of the shining city. And prosperity gospel got a mention in our discussion of that article about Trump University yesterday. Trump even had Peale officiate his wedding, his original and first wedding to Ivana, if the photo illustrating this has got that right. Peel's gospel, and that's in scare quotes, was sanctimonious and claimed that success and wealth were markers of, quote, God's will, meaning the Almighty handed down riches and power as blessings. Seems a little out of keeping with most mainstream religion, but it was self-help / capitalist propaganda masquerading as religious dogma, which is a great way to sell anything, really. The Power of Positive Thinking, yes, okay, so that's the actual name of the book, was his best-selling tome and urged followers to never give in to negative thoughts. Those thoughts would displease God and possibly cost you fortunes and vast power. Trump believed in this idea and shaped his entire life around it. That's the claim here, anyway. Guided by Peel's teachings, Trump hid his most shameful parts, and he's got a lot, denied them, and insisted he was a self-made man despite starting with his father's financial support and squandering those fortunes with reckless abandon. He was a total failure, but refused to believe it. That's in keeping with what we know about him. Trump relentlessly presented himself to the world as a financial success, a golden god of American exceptionalism. He surrounded himself with gold, with the markers of conspicuous consumption, all to project an image of infallibility and power. But he failed at everything. In one venture after another, Trump simply could not succeed, even in casinos where it was almost impossible to fail. After one failure after another, he was held up by banks who used his illusion of celebrity, meaning he became rich and famous for seeming rich and famous. And it's illustrated here with a picture of the liquidation sale at the Taj Mahal Hotel. Very interesting. Trump's denial of reality in favor of, quote, positive thinking, capitalized here because of the philosophy, was on full display with the stupid inauguration fights. He could not believe the reality that his crowd was smaller, that he wasn't the most popular figure ever. Peel's philosophy demanded it. Tragically, Trump's obsession with positive thinking has led to so many preventable deaths, economic ruin, and untold suffering. He has been incapable of grasping exactly what's happening as he's lost in his own narcissistic reality. It began with the idea that coronavirus was a hysteria or a hoax, an idea Trump passed on to the right-wing media. It simply couldn't be that bad. It couldn't affect America that much. It was all something to hurt Trump, this drummed-up pandemic. Illustrated here by a screenshot from the Sean Hannity show. Media uses virus coverage as political weapon, reads the Chiron here. Keeping with Peel's idea that God helped those who believed in themselves, Trump tried to sell the idea of a miracle end to the disease, that it might just disappear, right? As if he was being helped from above because the universe was always, always, always on his side. Of course, there was hydroxychloroquine, another miracle that might take down the pandemic simply because Trump wanted it to. It distracted from the problem of the pandemic while also providing a miracle that might help Trump. Again, the universe was smiling upon him. Meanwhile, wealthy and powerful people like Betsy DeVos paid for fake protests and movements to change the conversation, to push Americans back to work. Trump looked at this and saw his people with him, even as it was obviously a complete forgery. The Trump administration has continually lied about the pandemic, giving briefings and writing op-eds that there would be no second wave and that everything was under control, even as it ravaged the country. There's no telling how many lives could have been saved. While Americans suffered, Trump pushed and pushed and pushed for the economy to reopen. The idea was that if the numbers went up, the economic numbers, I guess, he'd possibly win re-election. And in his warped view, because of his past, Trump believed what was good for him was good for the country. But it took a toll. Even as Trump believed he was up in every poll, that he was almost universally popular, that he'd done everything possible to protect the country. The numbers, the economic numbers, kept dropping. The rally was empty. The walls were closing in. Like always, he had failed. This new tone is an act, and it's already over, by the way, as almost everyone predicted. Another illusion by a broken man willing to do anything, say anything, and sacrifice anyone if it means getting what he wants. At this point, faced with an electoral loss and public humiliation and possible prosecution, it's just another gamble. Again, for those who didn't understand yet, and I think you all understood, the Trump administration has no intention to save lives. They're not patriotic, nor do they feel duty. They're there to dismantle government as an organ of public good and expedite profit, power, and corruption. The things Trump has sold his followers aren't real. He never intended to build a wall. It was a product he would never roll out, an article of faith, something to conjure support while continuing to build his own power and his own empire. Trump has no intention of draining the swamp. Who do you think filled it in the first place? People like Trump obsessed with personal power and profit. It was a metaphor, a product, an illusion, and a lie. It's always been about him. That's it. That's all. The only thing Trump has tried to do is dismantle government as a public good. He slashed regulations, made the air poisonous, the water worse, our future disposable and commodifiable. This is a long con, and our lives have never factored into it. Not once. What we're watching is a narcissist infected with magical thinking realize he has once again failed spectacularly, although I'm not certain that he's actually realized it or won't allow it to do anything for him anyway. He is not interested in saving lives, only in continuing to worship himself. He'll sell a product in the meantime, but it's not real. It's never been real. And that's actually the wrap on that 24-tweet thread here. I guess along the way it made me sort of think it is possible, even in his own mind, that it's not that he's realizing he's failing, and it might not even be, oh, well, I only want to do things to benefit myself. He could even have bought into this philosophy so hard, although I just don't think so. I mean, I think he's pretty aware of his own personal benefit and all this. But you could justify it if you cared to do it under this philosophy by saying, well, yeah, but again, what's good for me is good for the country. If I admit that there is something negative about myself or something I've done, then I'm abandoning the program of the power of positive thinking here, and God will stop smiling upon me. And if he stops smiling upon the person in charge of the United States of America, well, then God will turn against America. And you don't want that. And if you're a religious type, you might buy into that and believe it. And it might just work for him that way too. Although I never really thought that, because he's not particularly religious, I'm not sure he's a true believer in all of that. He just sort of thought, this is a great set of trappings that I can use to, one, win evangelical votes, and two, throw people off the scent if they're dumb enough to believe that I'm doing this for some reason other than my own personal benefit. All right. I thought that was kind of an interesting take on things. There are many other stories still here. We have no shortage of things to go through. I happened to notice yesterday, interesting situation developing in the Portland situation. But I believe I've used situation twice in that sentence, having forgotten my way along the way. Bobblespeak, our good friend Bobblespeak on Twitter, now identifying himself as mask wearer for truth. But still under the Bobblespeak handle here, pointing this out. He says, seems like an untenable situation, but it is the tweet of Mike Balsamo, lead Justice Department and federal law enforcement reporter for AP, taking note of what was going on, part of what was going on in Portland, saying it's really striking talking to the deputy U.S. Marshals who have been working to protect the courthouse for weeks. Many are from Portland. They have friends who peacefully protest during the day, but at night they say demonstrations are hijacked by agitators set on violence. I thought this was interesting, one, because of just the brief comment that Bobblespeak had made here seems like an untenable situation. And it applies to so much here. Because I read it's part of a longer thread here from Balsamo, and I read some of the reactions to the thread, and it seems plausible to me, possible, that, many of the deputy U.S. Marshals there might in fact be from Portland, or at least the Portland area, and they may in fact have friends who are protesting peacefully during the day. And it may in fact be the case, and I think we've seen it elsewhere, that the tenor of the demonstrations changes as between daytime and nighttime, and that may have something to do with the fact that the composition of the crowd changes between daytime and nighttime. I can believe that. No one can stay there 24 hours a day. Well, in the Occupy situation, I guess they did, but I don't think that's what's happening here. So it's entirely possible that things change, and people who are going back to their homes for whatever sleep they can get in the middle of all this might not necessarily be the same people who are coming out and hanging out there all night, and they may have different motivations, etc. But what was interesting was the differing reactions to this. Let me get to that first. And I don't know that I have all of the comments directly from this one because I'm still stuck in the middle of the thread. But my recollection was, what was interesting was about, I don't know if I would break it down as 50-50, but some people reacted to this by saying, oh yeah, right, they're from Portland. Sure. What about the rest of them? Or I don't think that's really true. Or maybe 2 or 3 of them from Portland and the rest of them are imported from around the country. And they are moving personnel from around the country. They've been pretty clear about that and bringing them to Portland. But I didn't think it was untenable that several or maybe even the majority of the marshals that are there might in fact be from the Portland area. But I thought it was interesting that there were, I think, left-leaning people who were discounting the possibility that any or even some large number of these marshals were from Portland. That's propaganda. You're trying to make it be pro-police in all of this. By the same token, there were, I think, probably right-leaning commenters who said, oh, they wouldn't believe that there were different demonstrators during the day and during the night, and that it was excusing this violent behavior, as they saw it, of what was going on, at least at night there. There were some people who said there's no difference between the day and night. They're violent all day and they're violent all night. And no, they aren't different people. And no, there aren't peaceful protesters there. So it was very interesting to see what happens to a reporter taking, he might not even necessarily be taking intentionally middle of the road position, although we see that happen all the time among reporters. I just don't know about this reporter. I don't know his track record. Wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. But still being rejected from both ends of the spectrum, and then probably taking that as proof that he was right the first time. If everyone thinks I'm wrong, I must be doing something right. You remember that philosophy. Where does his thread begin? He explains what he was doing over the weekend. I spent the weekend inside the Portland Federal Courthouse with the U.S. Marshals. Mortars were being fired off repeatedly. Fireworks and flares shot into the lobby. Frozen bottles, that's the constant complaint of the law enforcement authorities there. Concrete, cans, and bouncy balls. That sounds a little less harmful and maybe a little more fun than the rest of the stuff. Regularly whizzed over the fence at high speeds. And you begin with questions. Mortars? Well, if you're shooting off those fireworks that you buy from, the fireworks stores that have the little tube that you light on fire and the fireworks fire out of the thing, that is a mortar, technically speaking. Mortar, I guess, just really refers to that tube that you're using to project your stuff out. Doesn't necessarily mean you're sending explosive rounds out there, as you might think when you're thinking about mortars. Certainly frozen bottles and pieces of concrete can be a problem if you're firing them or projecting them in any way, shape, or form. Probably that's happening. I just don't know whether it represents a majority of what's getting fired there. Bouncy balls sounds like fun and distracting. But anyway, he includes a link to his piece about it. On Portland streets, anger, fear, and offense that divides. So we won't have time to get through most of that thread, certainly not before our break here. And I remind you that after this break, we have our last segment coming up. This is traditionally when she's free, and who knows what the news day is like out there, especially if I had it right about Barr testifying today. Maybe Joan is tied up with those things. Maybe we'll hear from her during the break. She likes to call while we're off the air, make that a nice transition. That would be most welcome, of course. If not, we'll continue with what Mike Balsamo was finding while he was there in Portland. But more interesting to me was the reaction that even just trying to tell the news about what was happening there was meeting with strident opposition from all over. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just breaking news. Joan's here. That's the breaking news. And we're not sure if the Barr testimony has begun. I was just asking about that because I was so out of it. I was like, was that to yesterday and I missed it, or were they just reading advanced prepared testimony? I guess it is today. It's scheduled to be going on now. Laura Clausen is, I guess, covering it for the front page at the moment. But what happened? They haven't even begun yet because there was a car accident? Is that right?
Nadler's car got in an accident on his way there.
Wow.
So
Okay.
they're delayed. But
All right.
he's okay. He's fine.
Yeah.
It just
They
just
have to
delayed
stop and
things.
exchange information and insurance numbers, etc. All
Yes,
right.
I'm sure.
Okay, so I'm sure there was no conspiracy to send a car out there to smash into his car to delay him, because what's the point of that? But anyway.
It's Bill Barr. You
Yeah.
never know.
You never know for sure. And he probably thought, I would just like an extra drink of water before I lie, and this is one way to get it. You could just ask for time, but Bill Barr is an authoritarian and he enjoys doing things like that. But you've been working instead on covering the Republican, I guess the next, what might be a coronavirus relief bill of some kind, but
It is
maybe
not
also
a coronavirus relief bill.
Yeah. Okay.
I sent you Bernie Sanders' tweet that you were
great.
looking for before.
Terrific. I will pick that up. Yeah. That makes some
Yeah.
sense. And so as I recall offhand, it was Apache helicopters and God knows what else, surveillance planes thrown in there. What did you send it in an email or?
No, I tweeted it at you.
Oh, okay. I missed.
$2 billion for F-35s.
Okay.
$1 billion for surveillance planes. $375 million for armored vehicles. $360 million for missile defense. $283 million for Apache helicopters. $0 for in rental assistance. But here's the one that's really interesting and that you're probably starting to see on Twitter.
Yeah.
$175 billion for an FBI building.
Oh, yes. Right. Yeah, that was included in there, too. And people remembering, oh, yeah, the FBI thing and Trump and his hotel and his
Oh,
weird...
you already talked about it.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
rats.
Yeah. No, I mean, we haven't talked about that today. Just in the past, I remember that, he was opposed to moving. I guess the original plan was maybe move the FBI building out to the suburbs. But,
And in fact, they had already appropriated money for it.
Tell us. Well, you can cover that today. We saved that for you for today.
Well, that was not as much fun, you know.
Oh, well, I didn't mean to do that. But
Well, that's all right.
I was just
So,
pointing out
anyway.
that we I think mentioned it 10 months ago.
Probably because it's one of the Inspector General's investigations that's currently going on. Yeah, in the Obama administration, they had decided on 3 finalist locations for it in the suburbs, in Maryland or in Virginia. And Congress had actually already appropriated money for it, $913 million.
Aha.
And they were vetting the locations. Trump came in, nixed it, and now wants the existing site where the Hoover building is to be the site for the new building because it's 1 block away from his hotel.
Yes.
And he's worried that the federal government is going to want to raise revenue by selling off this prime spot, which, yeah, they are, to help offset the building of the new campus.
Mm-hmm.
But that means there will be a hotel there that will compete with his.
I guess that's a possibility. It's really interesting that I would have thought that Trump would have thought there is no way of competing with the Trump hotel. And in many ways, he'd be right about that. If you stay at another hotel while you're visiting Trump, anyway, while you're in Washington, you're in trouble. He'll find out. And so, you could build another hotel there. That would just be an opportunity if I were Trump, well, I don't know what I would do, but if I were Trump, I would say, let's build another hotel. Let somebody else build the hotel. And it's a built-in trap to find out who's a traitor and who I shouldn't be paying attention to.
He doesn't think that far ahead.
No, I guess not. He just thinks, well, I guess he thinks there's, regular people who will just, I guess, come to Washington, D.C. and be like, well, I'd like to be here in this area. And there's only one hotel, so I guess I'll just pay $600 a night. I won't walk a block in any direction or look on the internet or anything like that. And I hate Trump, but what can I do? It's the only hotel in this 1 block radius. Okay.
It's insane. It's ridiculous. It's not crazy. A serious bill. Oh, the other part of it that helps Trump. Right. Then this is just this is so Larry Kudlow. It's just gutting. All right. The 100% deduction for business meals and entertainment.
Yum. Good.
That's going to bring back the restaurant industry.
Right. People have been I was just there the other day, and there was nobody in the restaurant, and I thought, coronavirus, obviously. And then people outside said to me, no, it's the deductibility. I can't afford to eat here without being able to get part of that money back next year at this time. Oh.
I am definitely going to risk my life so that I can get this 100% deduction on my business meal next year.
I know, can't wait. Might die before I get the benefit of that deduction, but at least my estate will benefit by it. 100% deduction. Okay, so I mean, I don't know what that's something that they've been after for a long time. That's pretty much the sum total
of their assistance to the restaurant industry.
Yeah, other people can spend some of their money on the hopes that they'll get it back next year. I don't know how effective that is, but I guess if you're just sitting on a pile of money, I mean, it's a lifestyle deduction for Trump. That's the way he likes to live, and he likes to deduct power lunches, I guess, or always did back in the 80s.
I don't know what he likes. Yeah. He probably figures this will bring more people to his Trump restaurant.
Yeah, right. An expensive restaurant becomes theoretically less expensive next year when you get your deduction back. And it's not a credit for all the money you spend there. It's a deduction as against your tax. So you don't even really do that. But whatever. This was they used to be 100% deductible. I recall back in like the early 90s, they started ratcheting back on this stuff because, people eat lunch. If you're rich and you want to eat a rich person's lunch, it should cost more, Yeah. It's not zero deductibility, but, they ratcheted it down. And what's the problem? So pay for your own steak. What's the problem? I thought that was like self-reliant and everything. But of course, that whole thing is a lie. Exposed once again. And they're putting that in the coronavirus relief bill. So
that's in the coronavirus relief bill.
Yeah.
There's one thing in it that is workable for Democrats.
Yeah.
That's actually a good thing that they did.
Rally behind.
They've got the $1,200 payment again, one time again. Well, 2 times now, I guess.
One time, twice. That's Washington.
One time, twice. What what they did that's helpful is get rid of the age limit for the $500 dependent deduction or check.
Okay.
So now any dependent child can get it, an adult child can get it, as opposed to somebody who's under 17.
I see.
So
okay,
there's that.
That's better than it was last time. It's not necessarily the right
I
thing
mean,
to do.
it should be $2,000 for every person
Yeah.
until this crisis is over. But,
I guess I don't know. I was going to say we'll take it, but I don't know if we'll take it. Maybe not.
really, that's the only thing in it that I found that's redeemable.
Ah.
They have the awful reduction of the unemployment insurance boost by 66% from $600 to $200. But that they even want to decrease. They want to create a system. They want the states to create a system to pay out just 70% of previous wages.
All right.
Which, and I love this, the Republican labor commissioner in Georgia says is the dumbest idea ever.
It does seem awfully dumb. I mean, however many months we are into this, when people are running out of money from they've run out of relief money from when they ran out of money, and they say, well, what you need now is less money.
Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't make any...
But the problem for labor people, the labor offices all through the states, is that it's totally unworkable. This isn't how they do it. This is what the guy in Georgia said, Mark Butler, in addition to, quote, the dumbest idea ever.
Yes,
he says,
more?
We're not the IRS. We don't have your taxes. We don't know what you made last year. Our stuff is based on you getting laid off by a particular employer and them reporting to us about what the wages are.
Okay.
So, yeah, they're not the IRS. They don't have that money. They can't just say, oh, yeah, you made this much last year, so here. And they can't go to all of the employers to say, hey, dig out your records for last year for what you paid this guy who's now claiming unemployment.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And then take out a calculator and give us the number 70. We could take out a calculator. You could take out a calculator. But somebody has to take one out. Yeah, all right.
Totally unworkable, however, has never stopped the Republicans before.
It's a motivator for them to try and reach new heights. Well, yeah, that's no...
So, really, there's not much in here for Democrats to work with. It's sort of telling that, they finally get this over with, and the minute McConnell says he's ready to release it, Mnuchin and Meadows run off to meet with Pelosi and Schumer so that the real negotiating can happen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you got to find out what'll happen after they pass it in the Senate, I guess, and then now they got to work their way to see can we get this
I
into
don't
the House?
know if it's even going to come to the floor in the Senate.
Really?
It might.
It
might.
Okay.
But at least half of, well, I don't know, the Ted Cruzes of the world could be boosting their own numbers, but according to those Republicans, half of them don't support it because it costs too much. So it can't. Right. It's not going to pass in the Senate because he doesn't have a united Republican conference, and no Democrat is going to vote for it. So I don't think it's going to come to a vote there because it can't pass.
So it just sort of serves as a jumping off point to negotiate with the House?
It serves as Mitch McConnell being able to say, I did this.
Okay.
Which, he's tried to do with every one of them.
Yeah.
He's tried to control it every time, and he's been pushed aside by mostly Mnuchin and Pelosi and Schumer.
Okay, well, we know why they were.
Mnuchin seems to be the most serious negotiator on the Republican side in all of this, the one who really does see that this is a crisis, that we have to deal with this, and he wants to come out of it with some level of, I don't know,
Mnuchin?
Not having completely screwed it up.
That's who we're talking about?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and when you're talking about Mnuchin being the best, most responsible among the Trump team.
Huh. I wonder
Yeah,
what's
you know
doing
that
that.
there's an issue.
Well, okay. I mean, I guess we'll take whatever weak link they have to
The
offer.
most realistic. He's the one who says, okay, this isn't going to happen if Pelosi and Schumer don't support it. So we've got to deal with Pelosi and
Yeah.
Schumer.
I guess he watched Schoolhouse Rock at least, and he knows that.
Yeah.
And maybe he's afraid people will boycott his movies when he goes back to producer job. I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe he's just a normal
have no
person.
idea.
I mean, well, he's not that, but the most normal that they've got. And
He may get how the economy works.
Yeah. I mean, he is rich in his own right. He doesn't have to
Yeah.
worry too much about Trump, and he probably thinks, I became wealthy. I know how things work. Maybe. Okay, well, whatever the reason
I don't know.
is,
I
that's
might
what
be
he's
giving
doing.
him way too much benefit of the doubt, but he seems to be the one who kind of gets it.
Okay.
So, and then they take Mark Meadows along because
Oh, yeah, he's the chief of staff. Right.
he's the one who Senate Republicans and who Trump, for now, trust.
Huh. Okay. Is there time to fire another chief of staff before the election?
Oh, yes.
So you can do that pretty
There's
quickly.
always time.
Okay. Well,
Is there time to get a new Supreme Court justice before the election?
sure
If you
they
ask
think
Mitch
so.
McConnell, sure.
yeah. Well, they'll. I mean, if that happens, or give them the opportunity, they'll take it. I'm sure, and they'll do it in 10 minutes.
Yep.
I'm sure they've got somebody in mind already, and so.
I'm sure Susan Collins thrilled at that prospect.
Yes. Well, she probably never saw that coming because she doesn't open her eyes.
I'm
when
sure
she doesn't have to.
McConnell has promised her he wouldn't put her in that position.
Yeah. Oh well. But what does he care if she's on the way out the door too? So. All right. Well, let's see. What other items are occupying your time, or what do you wish was occupying your time? That might be a better question. I don't know.
What I wish was occupying my time was an actual, real effort to fix this mess. I mean, what Democrats came up with in the HEROES Act was not bad, but that was 2.5 months ago, and things are so much worse now.
Yeah, I guess even that would need some rethinking, just because.
It does need rethinking. I mean, they had something like $25 billion for schools in the HEROES Act and what they introduced back in May. And now they're saying, well, if you really want schools reopening, you're going to have to cough up $400 billion.
Yeah. Which,
And
there is that money out there.
the money's out there.
You could create it too.
And I think to get that money, I hate that McConnell's going to win, but the one thing I see him winning on probably is his insistence that there be 5 years of liability protections for schools and businesses.
Yeah, there are still people who think that's a good idea, as opposed to like leaving it to courts and juries and stuff to decide, whether something was reasonable or not. That's a favorite trick of theirs, just short circuit that. No rolling the dice with the possibility that you might be killing people intentionally or accidentally.
A jury's never going to be able to hear that.
Yeah. So,
I think that's going to be the one thing that Democrats end up having to give in on. It's not going to be Trump's FBI building.
okay. Well, yeah, I'd almost rather that be. If I could just exchange one for the other, I'd rather just, he's going to, raid the coffers. He does that anyway.
Right.
Maybe we can prosecute him for that later.
They can undo that.
Okay.
When Trump's gone and it's Biden. You're right. But optically, this one's too good for Democrats to go along with, the FBI building, because it's so clearly for Trump. And it's so clearly to benefit Trump personally, economically.
Right.
So, I don't think that they can let that one go.
Okay. Well, I don't mind them fighting about it, but yeah, the liability shield. I guess I wouldn't be terribly surprised if there were some Democratic sympathies out there for some version of that. I don't know if the Republicans have concocted a version that conservative Democrats can live with, but I don't care because it shouldn't be there. in the first place.
They might be able to water it down to a point where it's not that harmful. I don't know.
Well,
But what they have to fight for and what would be worth that is aid to state, local, territorial, tribal governments, which isn't in the Republican bill. All it does is say, okay, the money that we already appropriated under the CARES Act, you have more flexibility to use. You can't use it just for coronavirus response. You can use it to replace revenue. It's not enough money for, what's left over of that $175 billion 6 months into this crisis is not enough to make up for what states have lost. So that's got to happen. They want hazard pay for essential workers, which really has to happen. They want to continue the $600 weekly boost to people on unemployment. They want a 15% increase in SNAP benefits and food stamp assistance, which is really pretty critical. And what is so frustrating to see is that everything that the Democrats want to do is what it's going to take to get us out of this economically whenever we can, when the pandemic ends.
Yeah.
Which could be exactly what Republicans are thinking. Okay, Trump's going to lose, so let's just saddle Biden with a totally destroyed economy, just like we did Obama. And we can work with that. It's almost to the point where you think Republicans are thinking that way.
Could be.
Let's burn it all down so that it's harder for him to build it back up.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they've taken care of themselves, for instance, by insider trading or something like that, and amassed a massive fund for themselves. And so, it's gonna. I won't make as much as I would have made, perhaps, in a healthy economy. Although you never know, because the economy can also be in the pits, and the stock market is flying high. But we're taken care of. I got my stocks. I've got my money. Do I have enough to weather the storm while watching Biden rebuild the economy? And I guess it's interesting. A backhanded vote of confidence for Biden. He will rebuild the economy, and eventually everything will be fine, and I'll make more money again. If I didn't have any confidence that he could do it,
scream about the deficit again.
Yes, right. Though
you're already
campaign on
seeing that. They're already preparing for Biden.
True.
You're already seeing the deficit hawks come out.
Mm-hmm. And
which reminds me, that's another thing that's in this bill that I forgot to write about: the stupid Trust Act.
Okay, that's a bad name for a bill.
Which is unfortunately bipartisan because yes, we still have deficit peacocks among Democrats. That sets up another cat food commission, another Simpson Bowles kind of commission to cut Social Security.
Those work great.
Yes.
Well, okay. Well, they're bad at eventually cutting Social Security, but that is what they try to do.
They're just going to keep trying. That comes from Romney, the person who doesn't certainly ever have to worry about whether he has Social Security.
Right. And
Joe Manchin.
Fun guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So interesting. Yeah. Okay. I see your. So did you say that you didn't make it into your article this morning? But
it didn't make it into my article this morning, so I'm going to have to follow up on that. But yes, it is going to be in there.
Exclusive here on the show.
I wrote about it last week too.
Yeah. Okay. So not exclusive. Okay.
Yeah.
But it was fun to realize on the air. Ooh. Another thing. If you've just found Daily Kos today, you wouldn't know this. But if you were here on Friday, you got
it. Click on my name and go back and you'll see it.
Yes, I see it here. Just when you thought Social Security was safe from Trump, McConnell puts it on the chopping block from Friday. Excellent. Yes. So, if you only found us on Monday, scroll back or consider this an exclusive report until it's reported later, like 15, 20 minutes from now when you write it down. Forget.
And if you're really new to Daily Kos, just Google Daily Kos Cat Food Commission to find out what it is that we're actually talking about when we say Cat Food Commission.
Right. Oh, true. Yes. Lingo won't help if you're brand new. But, okay, that's true. And if you're really, really new, you won't even be able to find it because you'll be busy complaining about the layout of the front page of Daily Kos, which... it don't feel bad about complaining about the layout. Everyone's used to it.
It's tradition.
Yes.
It's tradition. I personally still miss corner banner guy.
Oh,
I mean, I'm way
Up in the
back in
box.
version 2 in my designer before we had that really material or militaristic
Oh.
font for Daily Kos.
Oh, yes.
See, I go back to the way it was when I started. Darn
Right.
it!
Yeah. Right. One column down the middle of the thing, and yeah, it's I did say it's a big tradition. Everybody complains about it. Don't feel bad about it, but also realize everybody eventually gets used to the new one, even though they say they aren't going to. And then when I change it again, the one that everybody says is terrible now is the one that everybody wants back later.
Right.
So
Right.
it's fun, and it'll make you
Although
feel.
I still do miss Corner Banner Guy.
I guess so. Yeah. Well, there's lots of aspects of it I miss. I don't know if I remember all the old designs, but usually with each one of these things.
It means it's good. It really is good. It means a lot less scrolling for you.
Mm-hmm.
It means once you're used to it, seeing everything you're looking for, like you just scroll down a little bit and there's all of the recent stuff and you get a better idea of what it is. It means that really important stories don't get pushed down the page. They stay up there where you can easily go back to them, think about them, talk about them, share them. It's better.
It makes good sense, and it's in keeping with the format that most others are using these days. And we were kind of stuck with that. Well, what do we do? It's an important story that has been written here, but we like to refresh content every half an hour, and we sort of still have that blog format. And you're taking good stories and pushing them down. Why isn't there? We've tried different versions of that in the past, but this is a new one. So it's time to go hate
let's
it.
just do a thing like, up in the top left corner you see, I don't know what day it was, teen asylum seeker detained by Trump administration at hotel speaks out.
Yes.
That's a story that you want to be able to spend some time with and think about. And it gets to stay there while the ridiculous Trump promotes COVID-19 claims from doctor who also promotes alien DNA and demon sex theories.
Yes.
Which is everybody also wants to talk about, but which doesn't really have staying power. It's fun.
True.
We put it there. You get to talk about it, and the important stuff stays at the top of the page after that one falls down.
Yeah. See, we didn't even get to talk about the important stories that you brought up, but, it'll be easier to do now if you open up the front page and see all the things. And that's the whole show is mostly, about 75% of it is me apologizing for not being able to get to certain important stories.
Because they've scrolled down the page and they're hard to find. Yeah.
Or scroll down the pages of my mind, certainly. And
change is hard.
Yeah, it's
true. And I was involved in the development of this one for the last couple of years, so I've gotten used to it. So it's easy for me to say, you're going to like it because I've had all of this time to get used to it. But eventually I think this one's going to be easier in some ways for people to adapt to. I hope.
Yes.
I really hope. I hope we don't lose people.
In case of
Stick
emergency,
around,
there is
give it a try.
the button to switch back if you need to. But yeah,
and there's the button to switch back.
Right, but you can't
for
switch
a while.
back to like
I don't know
3,
how long that button's
4,
going to be there.
Yeah,
But
eventually you
for a
have
while.
to do it. But okay, well, it's a topic people are going to be talking about, and I just wanted to say once again, I'm not just me. Joan agrees. It's okay if you don't like it at first. Give it a chance. There was a reason behind it. A lot of the complaints, they love to say, there's no possible reason. Of course there's a reason.
There's always a reason. We don't do these things just to torture you.
Yeah, and if we did, so what? What are you going to do about it? I learned that from Trump.
Marcos might do this to torture people.
Yes,
he's Marcos. But
right.
No, that was a joke.
I doubt it. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for. We'll have to throw that in there, a little meta in there for those of us who are longtime fans of the site in the background. And so we'll be looking out for the update about remember that Social Security is under threat, and whatever else comes up during the day. So thank you for coming by and sharing the stories with us. And
you are most
saved
welcome.
the good stuff for you, I hope. And
yes. I'm off next week.
That's right. Okay. So we'll look past that and start anticipating seeing you back in 2 weeks. We'll forget all about this. The next Tuesday doesn't count, everybody. There's no Joan. So So thanks. I'm glad we got to catch up with you today. I'm sure not much will change in 2 weeks.
Oh, Lord.
So when you're back, we'll be discussing the alien president DNA thing, I guess. New outer space beings take over our government, and everything other than that continues apace, because it'll turn out that Trump was an alien the whole time. That's my prediction.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay.
Human spawn.
That's a trending topic on Twitter right now, the demon thing. And the dog thinks she agrees. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen. All right.
I think I'd better go see who's at the door.
Yeah, go find out. We'll find out in 2 weeks when you come back and tell us. Try to make a note to remember that. Thanks, Joe. Take care, and we'll see you then.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, what's the most important thing we can fit in about what's coming up next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? I don't know. We'll take this one. Wealthy donors are pouring millions into the fight over mail-in voting. And days after a legal challenge by Oregon failed because of legal standing, remember that? Protesters have filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration over its Gestapo tactics in Portland.